Get started. Welcome everybody today to our early echo session. If you will just take a minute and make sure that you drop your contact information into the chat. We are recording today's sessions, and if you are joining us, you're giving us permission to be recorded. If you don't want to, please go ahead and just disconnect. We are hoping that within this early echo session, we have an interactive community. So please make sure to turn on your cameras, join in the conversation with our presenters, and just be engaged in our case studies. We have during each session, we will have a case study or presentation narrative, however we want to call those. Those are really the best way to solidify any of our skills that we are learning. So if you are ever interested in presenting a case and getting information about one of your families you work with, please consider sending one in. Every time I move, it shuts me off. Sorry. The next thing is we want to make sure that we protect any individual privacy. So avoid using any identifiers like their first or last name, addresses, emails, people that they work with. Just make sure that you de-identify. You can reach out to any of our hub members. They all have an asterisk in front of their name that you can find them in the chat, or just reach out to Early Echo if you're unsure of those. Here's how to rename yourself on your profile. You can do it either going up to the 3 dots or on the participants. Please put your name, your state, your organization, and your job title. Once again, here's how to raise your hand if you have any questions. And as always, please, if you want to have those materials ahead of time, reach out to earlyecho@usu.edu, and we'll be glad to send you the registration link. We have all of our presenters all the way up until December, so you can register in advance for all of those sessions. Another plug for our surveys, that's the way that we give you a certificate of attendance. So if you'll fill those out, you might want to check your junk email if they've gone to that, but that's how we send out our certificate of attendance after you complete those surveys. Those surveys really help us as a hub determine what kind of things you as the participants are looking forward to having. We have a Canvas site that we store all our material, as well as on our website. You can access the YouTube link, and we have a discussion board. Today at the end of this, or tomorrow, in your follow-up email, we'll be sending out a Jamboard. We would love to also have you guys put in like one idea that you are using from the session, or something that you gained out of today's session. We ask you to do that in chat throughout the visit, or not throughout the visit, throughout this session, but sometimes that gets hard to do. So we're going to try this Jamboard. Case studies, once again, if you have any situation, real life situation that you want to hear from your colleagues about, please reach out and complete a case presentation. There's just so much useful resources and information that are gained with that. Red cap is where our surveys are coming through. So if you have any struggle with that, like I said, always check your spam and junk email. And then we do have a Facebook page, and we post on that pretty regularly. So please go ahead and like us on Facebook. A new note for this is that the CPD is the Center for Persons with Disabilities at Utah State is going through a rebranding process. So we will now be known as the USU Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice. So when you start seeing USU IDRPP, it is the same as the CPD. We are just doing a rebranding. I'm really excited today to have Summer Gunn from Utah State. She is a clinical director in the SPED department and is really responsible for onboarding and new training of upcoming professionals. She just has a wealth of knowledge. She is a board certified behavior analyst, and right now is enjoying Utah's southern heat down in St. George, Hurricane, Utah. So without further ado, I'm going to just mute myself and turn the time over to Summer.
Hey, thank you, Janelle. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I gotta find the screen I want to share. Okay. My screen went away, so let's see if I can find the screen I want. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to talk today about an overview of the routines-based interview. Also new in the last year or two, this was developed by Robin McWilliams, and he has rebranded some of it to be the routines-based conversation as well. So if you hear those two terms, routines-based interview or routines-based conversation, the principles that I'll talk about, or the processes I'll talk about in this presentation, align with both of those. So I just was going to introduce myself real quickly again, expand on what Janelle shared. I am a parent of a child with a disability and have received early intervention and special education services my children have, and been a parent on that end. And because of that, I've been part of the Utah Special Education Advisory Panel, and I just ended my term as chair on that, and have really worked hard with the State Board of Education to provide more support for school districts to have inclusive programs. And we're seeing a lot of momentum at this state level in K-12 or 3 Part B on inclusive environments. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I would love for you to reach out to me and see how you can be involved with that. One thing that's built into the law for early intervention is natural environments. And it's clearly stated within Part B of IDA, but not always clearly implemented. And so trying to maintain that level of inclusion for children as they start to enter the school system is a passion of mine. And if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out. I work currently as a clinical instructor preparing early childhood special education students at Utah State University. And because of that, I've had experience in classroom settings, and then as a parent and working and doing professional development with early intervention, and have learned about assessment practices that really help to incorporate families so that you can be responsive to their individual culture and individual dynamics, and get at the information that's most authentic and useful for families. And so that's one reason that I've really liked the routines-based interview. So my objective for today is to share with you information about the routines-based interview as a family-directed assessment. And remind me, Janelle, what time we end with the presentation.
Sorry, I can never find my mute button in time for that. So if you'll end about 12:45.
Okay, perfect. I also want to link back to the Division for Early Childhood, a division of the Council for Exceptional Children, recommended practices. These are practices that, based on research and evidence-informed practices that we as early providers of services should incorporate into our practices. And they have ones for different categories, and the A stands for assessment and E stands for environment. And so as I talk about this tool that can be used, I wanted to demonstrate how it fits within those recommended practices. So I provided those here. Also, Part C of IDEA outlines the requirements for early intervention services. And within that, they require that a family-directed assessment occur. And so these are the policies that we act under when we complete assessment. And so I wanted to make sure that I pointed out what that policy outlines so that as we go through the tool, you can see how that aligns with that. So it should be voluntary, include the family's description of its concerns, priorities, and resources, which are then documented within the IFSP. Identify supports and services necessary to enhance the family's capacity to meet the developmental needs of a child, and conduct it in a non-discriminatory manner. And as we're learning more about equity and diversity and practices that really help to bring in authentic information from anyone and everyone, this tool is one that you can approach in a way that can be non-discriminatory and really look at the family's needs within their context. So there's different types of family-directed assessments. There's informal ones that programs or individuals can design to get at the information that they want to be able to determine the family's concerns, priorities, and resources. But then there's also tools that have been developed. And the routines-based interview or routines-based conversation is one of those tools. And just like every family is unique, it's important to have an understanding of multiple tools so that you can meet the uniqueness of families. And oftentimes you might need to gather information through multiple tools in order to get the scope of understanding of the family and their needs that will be useful in developing the IFSP outcomes and services. So with the routines-based interview, it's a semi-structured interview, meaning that it's a conversation that you have back and forth between the provider and the family, but there is a structure to follow, but it's not like a scripted text that you follow. So it's a semi-structured interview. It covers routines across, you can go across the home, across community settings, or even across classrooms. It can be conducted with any care provider. If the parent gives consent, the family, the child's care provider, or if they're in a school-based setting, the classroom teacher, in order to get an understanding of that child's independence, participation, and social interactions within their environmental routines or activities. From it, you can create a list of functional outcomes, outcomes that meet the needs of the developmental needs of the child within the environments that they are in, that they will be behaving in, that they will be functioning in. And then it can help to start or continue building positive relationships with caregivers. As you build rapport through the interview process, you can build your relationship with families so that they can work better as partners with you in providing early intervention services. So some of the benefits and barriers to using the routines-based interview benefits families based on research conducted by McWilliams and colleagues. The families are more satisfied with the IFSP outcomes when developed through this routines-based interview or conversation process. And the results in better or more functional outcomes. Better is so subjective. What they mean by that is that it results in outcomes that match the functional and developmental needs of the child those align more when you use a tool like the routines-based interview. They also researched and surveyed and found out, why are people not using the routines-based interview? What are some of those barriers? Some of it has to do with the time requirement. We have a lot of demands and a lot of demands for assessment. And so with the routines-based interview, you want to be able to sit down and get the whole scope of the child's day with the family and their interactions. And so typically a routines-based interview will take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half if you're going to get the information, like a thorough look at the information that you can get from the routines-based interview. And for some, that can be prohibitive. But there's ways to get at the information and support families, even if you have assessment time windows that are narrower. And that's really thinking responsibly about how can I get this information in the areas that I really need this information for, by focusing in on those families' concerns, resources, and priorities within the routines-based interview. Also, it asks about details we're not used to hearing about. Typically, like when we do the Battelle Developmental Inventory, we have scripted questions that we ask, or some other kind of formal assessment. We have scripted questions that we ask that show like the scope of what that question is. But when you're doing the routines-based interview, you're just being very curious about the family and asking about details that maybe are outside of your scope of practice and expertise, but are going to be useful for the team to consider when working together to determine outcomes and services. And so sometimes that can be uncomfortable. And I think for me, the best way to get over uncomfortable is immersion. It's just getting in there and practicing and doing. And then also debriefing and talking with colleagues about the things that felt uncomfortable as I learn and practice new skills. You'll find that most people feel uncomfortable and eventually get past that uncomfortable phase and are comfortable with their conversation and their cadence as they work with families in the interview process. So the key takeaway from this form of family-directed assessment is that whatever assessment practice that you use in order to gain information about the family's concerns, priorities, and resources, it's imperative that you as the provider remain curious. I went to, back when we used to go to conferences, I think the last one I went to was on child mental health. And this is one thing that they emphasized, is that if you can remain curious and allowing families to tell their story, and that you are more likely to be trauma informed in your practice if you can remain curious and show that you are interested in what they have to say without steering the conversation to what you want them to say. So just being open and curious about their family's concerns and their priorities, and what supports them in this journey that they're in with their child. Having that, those soft skills of like your facial expression and your body posture and the way that you're directing eye contact, all of those things lead to this sense of I'm curious and I care. And it's really important to have those skills when you're completing a family-directed assessment, especially the routines-based interview. So, the routines-based interview should occur right after eligibility is determined and before the IFSP is written. Depending on your program's timelines and the processes they use, this is the optimal place for it, so that information, you can take what you've learned about the eligibility assessments that were conducted and use that to inform what you're learning about the family through the routines-based interview, and so that your outcomes can address the developmental needs of the child, but within the family context and structure. So that's the sweet spot for it, is right after eligibility and before writing the IFSP. And then as you go to review the annual and the 6-month IFSP meetings, it's good to come back and maybe more briefly interview the family about their changing concerns, priorities, and resources using the routines-based interviews so that your outcomes can reflect the family's current routine and context. We all know that even a month or two difference in a young child's life can change the family structure or routines or dynamic completely. And so it's important to revisit this process and not just do it the one time. So does anybody have any questions real quick before I get into the pieces of the routines-based interview? I can't see the chat, so if somebody puts something in the chat, Janelle, you can hype up.
Okay, as soon as I see something.
Okay, so the routines-based interview, I've got to move my screen around because I was trying to, you guys, sorry for a second. Okay, so when you're conducting the routines-based interview, it's really important to first prepare the caregiver for what the process is. When I'm training pre-service educators and pre-service early interventionists, this is the part that's sometimes hard for them to remember, is that it's important to explain the processes and the steps that you're going to be going into as you work in any capacity with families, whether it's assessment or the routines-based interview or a family coaching session. You want to set the stage for this and this and this and this is going to happen so that the family knows the expectation and can respond to that semi-formal structure or the dynamic that the agenda that you're setting up for the interaction. It puts parents at ease to know the expectations of what's going to happen and in what order things may happen. So it's important to prepare the caregiver by explaining the purpose and the structure of the interview. You want to ask the caregiver who should be participating in the interview. Depending on the family dynamics and preferences, it may be appropriate to have multiple caregivers participate in the interview or single caregivers to participate in the interview. So you want to discuss that and have a plan for that with the family before. And decide on the format, whether you're going to do it virtual through video conference or you're going to do it in person and where that's going to take place. Oftentimes you want the parent to be able to have some kind of support for their child during the time so that they can have more undivided attention to the interview so that you can really get at what are those concerns and priorities that the parent has when they're not distracted. So thinking through the timing of that, when it's going to take place, it's important to plan that out with the parents so that they can be attentive, which is different than the other assessments. The other assessments, you want it to be at a time that's optimal for the child to be able to respond and be able to participate in family coaching sessions. But with the routines-based interview, you want to think about what is optimal for the parent to be able to participate in this. So you want to talk through that with them, and that's a shift for them too. So you need to be able to explain that along with the purpose of the interview. You want to follow the semi-structured interview and then be as informal as is appropriate. That active listening, being curious and thinking about your body language and your those soft skills. How am I demonstrating that I am attentive to what they're discussing? And this is different over a virtual format than it is in person. And so thinking about those skills is important, and self-reflecting on your skills in that area is important. This is something that I've always been shy and a starer. Is anybody else out there a starer? Like my family has to like remind me at dinner that I'm part of their table and not the table next to us sometimes, because I'm like listening to the other conversation. So this is something that I've had to actively work to learn, is how to be attentive and responsive to the person in front of me. So if it's not something you have naturally, it's okay to recognize that and then work with a mentor or a colleague or someone you trust to build those skills within yourself. And you want to make sure that you're prepared to respond appropriately to emotion. And this is especially important when you're working with families from diverse backgrounds too, because those implicit biases that you may carry, implicit means that you don't always recognize them as a bias until they come out of you in the presence of someone. So you want to reflect and think about that. And how do you respond to strong emotions? And emotions demonstrated from people from different backgrounds and from different diversity. And how can I, as a professional, make sure that the way that I respond is validating to the family and sensitive to them. And so it's important to think through, like, if somebody gets really loud, what do I naturally do? And how can I make sure that I'm responsive to this family? Or if somebody gets really emotional about something, what do I always want to do? Do I want to tell them, it's okay, don't cry because it's uncomfortable for me? Or is there a way that I can remind myself to be sensitive to them, and if they want a break or if they want to continue to demonstrate emotion, and remain curious and ask for their preferences as you go. So that's another thing to think about when you're doing family directed assessments and the routines-based interview is, like, how do I respond to the unexpected that might happen, and how can I prepare myself so that I respond in a compassionate way that addresses everybody's individual differences without putting anyone off. Okay. So after you're all prepared and you're ready to do the interview, let's see, I just realized my watch is dead and the time is not changing on my watch. So I got to see what time it is real quick.
Summer, you're at 12:30, so you're good.
Nice. Okay, now I got to move this and I have to start my show again. Okay, I've got the captions back on, I hope. So then when you're sitting down to do the interview, the first part is to figure out what are the families, well, the very first part, and I don't have it on there, is to figure out who is part of this child's daily interactions. Like, who are we going to be including in this picture of this child's daily interactions? Robin McWilliams uses the ECHO map process to do that, which is another form of family-directed assessment. But you want to figure out who is going to be part of this conversation and get that down so that you're informed and you can say, like, what is the little sister Julie doing at this time? Or the 16-year-old brother Manny, what is he doing at this time? So that you can get a full picture of what this child's experiences within their family structure. The next thing is you have them lay out their main concerns. What was the reason for their referral or their continued concerns for services within your program? From there, you're going to explain to them, now we're going to go into the routines or the activities that you do as a family. And we're going to start at the beginning of the day and we're going to go all the way to the end. And we're really looking at your whole family and what's going on with your whole family, with the caregivers and their needs, as well as the child's and other family members. And then you say, hey, what happens when you guys wake up? How do you wake up? And if they say, well, Johnny, we get him out of bed, you can pause and say, what about you? When do you wake up? When does the other care provider wake up? The other parent wake up? So that you get a picture of that whole day. So you start and you go through until the end of the day. And then you ask them what's called the worry and change questions that get at the big picture of their what they want for their child, what their hopes and dreams are for their child and for their family. And then you're going to recap in a brief 5-minute recap about what information you were able to obtain through the interview. And then from there, identify priorities of outcomes that they would like to address and put those in a priority order. I've seen programs go through to the recap part and then take this information to the IFSP, and at that point order, determine priorities and order them. So this cycle can happen all at once, or it can happen across multiple visits. And that's one place where if the time is prohibitive, that you can work through that barrier, is by finding at what point in our program process can each of these pieces happen in a way that still gives us the information that we want in order to have it be useful in determining IFSP outcomes and services. Okay, so when you're looking at the daily routines, when you start like, tell me about your day and how does it begin? You want to find out with each of the groups of activities, we call them routines, but I tell the pre-service students that I teach not to use the word routine because it's not necessarily the way families talk about their day. So within a portion of the day or an activity, you want to find out what everyone is doing during that time. And that gives you information about who's there, who is a resource, who is a concern and takes attention, and what kind of things are they doing and interacting with, so that you thinking about really like functionally putting an outcome into an activity, you need to know those dynamics in order for it to be successful. So you want to find out what everyone is doing, and then find out how is the child participating within that activity? What does their participation look like? What kind of level of independence do they have within their participation? And how are they interacting with all the others who are within that activity of the day? And then from there, once you get that information, you want to ask the parent about their level of satisfaction with the way things are. And that can give you an understanding of what activities in the family's life are going really well and which ones they're struggling with. Because sometimes you want to identify activities that are going really well so that you can use those strengths. You understand what's going on, what they're doing, who's there, who's available to help, and why those routines are going really well versus another routine that they rate lower. There might be some dynamics that you could bring in from that good routine into this other routine. So that's one reason to really get a good picture of both the good routines, the ones they rate highly, and the ones they rate lower on the satisfaction scale. You can learn from those other activities about who's present and what made those work, and see what are some of the holes in this other activity, why they're not working so well, this other routine. So you want them to give you that information across the day, across the activities, and then you're going to star the areas that they specify a concern in. Like, they're doing this, but I would like them to do this, and so I'm less satisfied with this routine because this isn't happening. Star those so that you can come back to them and expand on them within your recap and determining priorities. Okay, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask at any time, because I know we're going to be wrapping up in just a minute and I want to be able to answer your questions. One thing that comes up is you get like the rapid fire routine. First we wake up, then we go have breakfast, then we get dressed. And so when you're doing the routines-based interview, if it starts out like that, you just say, okay, that sounds like a busy morning. let's talk a little bit more about what it looks like when you wake up. Tell me, I want to know more information about that. And then you start asking open-ended questions to get at more information about the child's participation, independence, and social interaction during that part. And then you say, what happens next? And so if you get that rapid fire, like, this is our day, let's say, let's go back and we'll figure out what happens here. You want to make sure that you help the family understand to stay focused on the things that they're doing and not the time that they're doing it. If they're doing it at 9 a.m., doesn't really get at the information that you want, which is what is the family's like satisfaction and functioning within the routines of their day around and the child's needs and strengths within their day. So the time of day doesn't matter as much as what is happening, who is there, and how the child is participating, their level of independence, and their social interactions. Okay, the other thing that's important is to take good notes while you're completing the interview. If you're using it digitally, you can screen share if you're doing a virtual meeting. If you are in person, you can sit in a position that the family can see the computer while you're taking the notes. If you're doing it on paper, you can use a form, or you can just free write on lined paper, or if you don't want lines on your paper, just free write on paper. But it's important to make sure that the family knows and is able to see the notes that you're taking so that they know that the information is a collective information, that you're not just taking notes for your own personal perspective, but that the notes reflect the family, like everybody's perspective that's there. So it's important to show those notes to them while you're collecting them. And then you can use those notes as a record of the assessment and to help you review and recap and organize the family assessment information that you collect through the interview. I don't have time to show you the video, but these slides went out, so I included a short clip of a routines-based interview for you to view on your own time so that you can get a feel of what the routines-based interview looks like or feels like. So I have that in there. Okay, the next thing is after you go through the day, you ask them 2 of 3 questions is what we have my students do. 2 of 3 questions. And this gets at the big picture for the family. What are the big picture concerns that you have and questions or dreams that you have for your child and your family? And about half the time I see families talk about something that is not even related to their child. So what do you lay awake at night and worry about? And parents will say, like, I really want to pay off my debt. And so that's what I worry about. It's not about their child's concern that they referred you to, but it's about this other thing. And so it can get at that bigger picture or other resources that the family might be desiring that aren't impacting their child directly, but are impacting their child at a cursory level as they impact the parent's capacity, and the parent's capacity is impacted in their ability to support their child's developmental needs. So that's what these questions are for. They're more formal than the rest of the interview. So they feel kind of like wonky and out of place when you look at the whole interview process, but it's really trying to get at that, like, what are those other holes that those things that we should be informed about that will help us to serve this family in their context that we're not getting at when we look across the day with their child. So once you do that, you do your recap. You talk about your starred concerns that the family has. You want to keep it brief to no more than 5 minutes. Sharing your notes as you go so the family can look through them if that's something that is helpful for the family. And then you want to also check for concurrence. You don't want to expand on discussion necessarily at this point, but if there's something that you misinterpreted or you had wrong or not the scope that the family wants you to have down, then you would add that at this time. Then you would take that information to list out what are those concerns and priorities that the family has identified through this process and what other ones are there. And then ask the family to rank them. Like if you could pick the first one, what would you pick? Second, third, to give you a hierarchy of what their concerns are. And then explain to them that the next step is to take all of this information that you're collecting through the assessment process to determine the IFSP outcomes and services in the IFSP meeting, so that this information can be useful and you can know like what times of day or what types of services are going to be the most effective for this individual family with their own context and needs. So hopefully I explained the main, I'm going to come back here, right here. The purpose of the family directed assessment within this tool that you can use, that it's voluntary, and that it gets at what are those concerns, priorities, and resources, and helps you as providers to identify the supports and services necessary within the family's capacity in order to meet the child's developmental needs. And then it can be conducted in a way that's non-discriminatory, that addresses each family's individual cultural, linguistic, and just diverse needs. As you, as a provider, are responsive to them and open and curious about how you can gain this information in a way that they're comfortable and they gets at the scope that they want to share with you. So at the end, I put some resources for you guys to be able to access protocols, training websites, and practice guides for more information on the routines-based interview. And then last, my contact information. If you want further discussion or training or explanation of the routines-based interview or routines-based conversation, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help you.
Great. I'm going to open it up to a question and answer before we get started on our case presentation. Summer, that was just a great, useful information about routines-based conversations. I love that. So thank you so much.
Just a quick comment before we get into Q&A. If you've gotten a private message from me, would you please respond to that? There's some information that we need. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, Summer, it looks like you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just curious if people want to put in the chat how many have used a tool similar to the routines-based interview or routines-based conversation. At least a few of you have. One thing that I like about the tool too that I didn't mention is how it can be like a multidisciplinary tool. You don't have to have a specific discipline in order to get that information that you will be useful. So for providers from a variety of disciplines, they can quickly learn how to use this tool and get at information across developmental needs. So.
Well, fantastic. Like Summer said, if there's any other questions or things that you want to have, reach out to Summer. And if you have a great idea, put that in the chat or a way that you might use this routine-based conversation. I am going to introduce Karen. I can't find you on my screen, so If you'll say hi, you will pop up.
Hi.
Okay, good. Thanks, Karen. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and she is going to take it away about her case presentation.
I don't see anything.
Yes, that's
There we go.
taking a minute. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so here you go, Karen.
Okay, I'm Karen Butler. I'm a speech pathologist with Summit County Early Intervention. Next. And I'm a primary service provider as well as a service coordinator. The little boy that I'm talking about today was referred to us because his family was concerned that he may possibly have autism. I think I'm looking at the slides and what I wrote. So I have more to say about this little boy than what's on the slides. So maybe could you flip through the slides, and I think everybody can read them, and then I can tell you a little bit more information. Is that okay?
That's fine. If that's how you want it to happen, you tell me.
Okay, so this is a good place to stop for a minute. So he qualified on the Battelle. His scores in adaptive, fine motor, and gross motor were all not significant. They were great. He was severely behind in personal, social, communication, and cognition. His parents were really worried about his restricted repetitive behaviors and how they were impacting their lives. So that's the one subject that I wanted to address with everybody today. Is there another slide? Okay, so these are his goals. He also has a toothbrushing goal. And the personal social issues and the repetitive behaviors are really impacting every aspect of their life. So I'm wondering what you guys have, what kind of information you have or what you can share about how to work with RRBs. I'm sorry, this is kind of not flowing as well as I thought it would. I should have stayed on topic.
You can go back and we can start it at the start.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So
you're
good. The mom did purchase the AAC kit. Go on up to that next one. Next, there.
Oh.
She's using a choice board at meals, and that's really helping. Yeah, okay, so restricted repetitive behaviors are really challenging, and they're impacting every aspect of this little guy's life. So I'm really curious to know what everybody has to say about how to work with these behaviors, how to shape them, and whether it's appropriate to use them as a springboard for forming relationships.
Do you want me to move or?
I think, yeah, go ahead. Okay, two-parent household, they're stable. He's got one little brother, big brother, family nearby. Both are employed, educated. They're really great, really engaged family to work with. Is there another one? Okay, so he's already made progress in all areas. He's using the choice board. He's starting to engage with his peers when they come over to visit at the house, playing in the backyard. It's hit or miss sometimes. If they go out in public to a public pool or to the grocery store, any place like that, he gets really, really frightened. but that's improvement because previously he was always terrified and would just separate himself from other people and other children. And yeah, I guess that's it. Let's talk about the restricted repetitive behaviors.
Okay, Summer has one question. She has her hand up. So Summer, go ahead and.
Sorry, I wondered what, like, if there's specific times of day or behaviors that are more pressing for the family. It looks like mealtime may have been based on the priority and the parents' approach, but are there, and then also with mealtime, is it about the pattern of it, or is it about the texture and the variety?
Mealtime has been tough. Initially it was because the mom wasn't really giving him choices of what to eat. She was offering him food and he would squish it and throw it on the floor. So since she's introduced the choice board, he chooses his food and he's much more likely to eat it. The one behavior that the mom was really upset about was he was obsessed with paper towels and toilet paper. And he would find them and just walk through the house, ripping off the sheets and leaving a trail. If she tried hiding them, putting them away, closing the doors, and he would either climb and find them or he would pound on the door until she would give in and open it. Since I've been seeing him, which it's been 3 weeks, his behaviors have become less intense, but they are still there. So she can remove, she can let him play with the toilet paper for a minute, then take it away, and he's not upset. When he gets up in the morning, he would come down into the kitchen with his mom. He would push buttons on the coffee pot, push the lever on the toaster, and then he could go on and continue with his morning. Now, and if she did not let him do those, it was complete meltdown. So now she can skip them and he'll want to come back, but it's not a tantrum. So now he stays calm. He lets her know he wants to do it. She takes him back. He runs through his routine and then they continue with their day with the choice board. So does that answer your questions?
Yes, that's helpful information. Thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask Karen prior to breakouts?
I have a question. I know that you described the toilet paper and paper towel. What other repetitive behaviors does he do or seems to be fixed on? Can you describe some of those?
When he goes, she has been taking him to a splash pad at a local swimming pool. And he stands at the drain and watches the water go down the drain. So that's what occupies his time at the pool rather than engaging with the water with his peers. That's another one that she's mentioned. Those are the only 3 that she has really talked about as being upsetting.
Okay. So Karen, I just want to clarify again for everybody. You want ideas around how to decrease some of the restrictive, repetitive behaviors, increase his engagement, how to use those choice boards, and interacting with others.
The main thing I want to know about is how do people deal with the restricted repetitive behaviors? So with a situation like I presented, where he's more focused on the water going down the drain than anybody else, when he's obsessed with moving through these steps in the morning before he can go on to his day, and when he's so engaged with the toilet paper and the paper towels that he's not learning and he's not interacting with anybody. That's what I want to talk about. I feel comfortable with the choice board
Okay.
and introducing him to peers in spaces gently. I feel good about that, but I would like suggestions about how to deal with those behaviors.
Could I ask a question about what frightens him when they go into public places?
You know, Mom's not really sure. All the places that she's talked about have been outside. So that's his most comfortable place, is being outside. But when new people are there, unfamiliar people are there, that's what really makes him shut down. They were at the pool at his grandmother's condominium complex last weekend, and there was an uncle and a cousin there who he hadn't met. And he couldn't stay with the group. He spent the entire time they were there standing at a fence watching a tractor.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking at it from a sensory perspective.
Yeah.
Is it visual? Is it auditory? Are there smells? Just more looking at, what's the trigger and whether you can modify from that perspective rather than just not taking them out.
Honestly, I don't know about a sensory trigger. There doesn't appear to be one. It could be people in his space. His bubble maybe is bigger than other children. There's no problem. There's no tactile issue. He doesn't have a problem with textures. He doesn't have a problem with clothing. He's fine walking outside on gravel, on grass, on dirt. He's not, I don't see any kind of visual stimmy activities. I don't really see any self-stim. Vestibular. I think he's okay. He likes riding on the bike seat in front of his dad, and they ride a mountain bike. So that's giving him a lot of vestibular stimulation, and he seems to enjoy it. So I don't think he's resistant to that, but that could be a way to calm him down in those situations when he's upset.
Said he gets fixated on watching the tractor at an activity. What happens if you interject something else into his routine or his activity? What kind of reaction would you get from him?
So do you mean like trying to, in that example, trying to distract him from the tractor?
Yeah, just what kind of reaction do you get if you do bring in something to distract him or try to shift his attention to something else?
That's an interesting question, because I think when in that situation, his mom tried to shift him back to the social situation that made him uncomfortable rather than shifting him to some other activity that didn't involve the social piece. So I can't answer that.
Did you already say where his language was at? How he's doing with receptive and expressive?
Well, both receptive and expressive were severely delayed on the Battelle. He's now started using single words and started imitating a couple of phrases pop out now and again. So now, rather than going to a door and pounding on it, he'll go to the door and say car, car, car when he wants to leave the room and go. It's usually because he wants to go someplace, not because he wants a toy that's outside the room. So he is starting to speak and he is imitating words. And I think that's definitely helping.
So if he is not interested when you try to redirect that type of play, what does he do if you try to join that? So like when he was looking at the tractor, if you started going vroom, vroom, vroom and pointing at the tractor or something like that, or when he's watching the water swirl, if you go in and splash while he's playing with it, does he care? Does he engage? Does he look at you?
Yeah, it's usually, so I'm just doing parent coaching and it's all virtual. So mom reports back to me what has happened and we troubleshoot it. And in the situation with the tractor, I think both of those situations, he's fine with his mom joining him. And he may do some verbal interaction and engagement with her. He seems to be fine with her joining in his play. If it was a stranger, that would be a different story. But if it's her who joins in, or his brother or dad, and he actually warmed up to his grandparents pretty quickly recently when they visited. So if it's a familiar person, he's comfortable.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we are going to go ahead and break into our small groups to provide strategies and supports on this restrictive repetitive. If hub members, if you will remember to assign a note taker, if we have time, we'll come back and share one idea from each group. They will be on our Canvas site. And we will have, it's about 5 after, so we will take about 20 minutes in our breakout groups. And Rachel.
As I'm creating these breakout rooms really quick, please check your chats and see if I sent you a message and respond. Thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. We just have a couple of people still finishing their last little sentence in breakout rooms. I always love when it breaks me off midstream. Rachel, do we have everybody back? Okay, so Kate, because you are the first person that I can see on my screen, I'm going to have you guys, you can say who's going to share, but just one idea from your breakout room really fast.
Yeah, so Pat and I were in the same group, and Pat nominated Gloria Moreno to be our spokesman.
Okay. So you just said you just one idea, or just you want me to go?
One idea, and then you'll share those in, and Kate will compile them, and they will be on our Canvas. But
there are so many good ideas. Replacing an activity that's not acceptable with an activity that may be more acceptable.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Fantastic. Okay.
I have a whole bunch of them.
Good. Fantastic. So she'll be so excited. And then Summer, wherever you are, I have you next on my list. So your group.
But Jackie kept notes for us. Jackie, what do you have?
Okay. So
Jackie, you're muted. I don't know where she went. So maybe she.
okay.
So real quick, one of the ideas that I had is about using a visual timer and ideas about where to get those from and using it in kind of pre-training and then integrating it into the activity that's more difficult.
Oh, that's a great idea. Those visual timers. Okay, Heather, your group.
All right, so a couple of things. We talked about playful sabotage, and then we also talked about introducing something else that would be of interest to visually track, like a boat, shark, mermaid, something like that when he's watching the dream.
Fantastic. What great ideas. So if you were the note taker for your group, if you will send in your notes to earlyecho@usu.edu, we will compile those. We will also send those out to the case presentation. Karen, you'll get all those, but they are then saved on our Canvas. If any of you want to go back and review those and use some of those ideas with some of the families that you currently work with. Our next session is August. I can't believe I don't want to say August because summer will be over. So August 4th at 12 o'clock. And we will be talking about, Kirsten, I always mess that up because it sounds so crazy to me. Manual constraint therapy. Did I say it right?
Constraint induced manual therapy, I think it is, CIMT. So.
Okay, so we'll be learning about that in our August one. So if you want to join us, we would love to have you. If not, have a great rest of your day and enjoy.
Could you give me that email address again?
So it's earlyecho@usu.edu.
edu dot what?
earlyecho@usu.edu.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.